And when I saw how quickly, in the blink of an eye, that dinghy just disappeared into the sea, I thought, if he goes in, I'm just going with him because I'll never be able to rescue him. I don't want to be on this boat in the storm. So if anything happens to him, I was ready to just jump in the sea and die with him.
If you're tired of arguing with strangers on the internet, try talking with one of them in real life.
Welcome to Back in America, the podcast.
I really want to dive into the before the trip time, and I want you to take me back to the last night in your farmhouse. You have sold everything, your furniture is gone, the horses have been sold, the school year is behind you. You have one more sleep in this house where you've lived for 30 years, I believe. How do you feel? How is that last night for you? Set the scene for me, please.
Well, the only thing we did not sell was our bed. And our neighbor was going to come pick up the bed the morning that we woke up because by, I think, noon, we had to transfer. The owners were coming and we had to leave and transfer the keys to the house to them. So it was very eerie going to bed that last night. It was a sense of finality, a sense of adventure, a sense of leaving a home. My husband built our house with his own two hands. It took him 2 years, and we lived in an apartment, and he built this house on weekends and nights for 2 years. We cleared the land with by hand. We couldn't afford backhoes and bulldozers, so we cleared the property tree by tree. We put in the fence posts by hand. We built the home, so there was a lot of labor in this house. But we were also very firm on the fact that this was the adventure that we were meant to be on, and because I was just graduating college, I had to move up north to where he lived, and I came with horses, so he built me the farm, and we had our kids right away, so the sailing got put on a back burner, but we poured our heart and our soul into our farm and our children and our community for 30 years, so we felt like we had done our best, we had lived very full lives, very meaningful, very rich, and now we were ready for that next step. We were very, very ready for it.
Did you get any sleep that night?
Yes, I did because the day before we had an estate sale where people walk through our house and just bought everything in there, like everything they saw except that one bed they could buy. And we had a barn full of equipment and tractors and lawnmowers and ice hockey gear and camping stuff. And it was so chaotic having hundreds of people at your home and going through all of your stuff and like scavengers just taking it all that it wore us out to the point where not sleeping was not an option. So we fell to bed exhausted.
So we are going to go back and forth between that night and your life before and where you are now. For people not seeing this on YouTube, the image I see is you inside your boat cabin. The boat is
Mhm.
called Equus. How do you say that? It's Latin for
Equus.
horse.
It is
Equus.
Latin for horse. And my husband designed a giant horse head on our spinnaker. So when we're going downwind, we have this 20-foot horse head, our sea pony that is carrying us across the ocean, which is very apropos for our life of being around horses and how they were the focus of our lives. And now we still have a connection to that through our boat.
So where are you? I mean, if you were to step outside the cabin, what would you see?
Well, I'd fall in the water if I stepped off my boat because we
Sure.
are anchored in the harbor, but there's, probably 60 or 70 other boats in this harbor as well, because when people cross the Pacific Ocean, there are a few places that they could land. They could land in Gambier, which is a group of islands, or they could land in the Marquesas, which is a group of islands. And this is the biggest of the Marquesas. So we are on the island of Nukuhiva. It's only got about 1,000 people living here. tiny grocery stores and an airport, and that's about it. But
And you are as far as we can imagine from the US continent.
we were about 4,000 from Panama.
Pretty far. And it's, as we can see, you are lightly dressed. It must be pretty hot and nice. And
It's between 70 and 80, 365 days a year.
wow. Okay. All right. So that set the scene for us. You're in a boat and you are where you wanted to be. When you married your husband, you had this project. It took you 35 years to accomplish it. Why so long?
Like I said, he had a career, I had a career, and we were very involved in our children's lives. And our last son was really recalcitrant to leave home. I think he would have been there forever. It's really funny because when we told him that we were going off to sail around the world, he sent us a video of these geese that live on cliffs. And there was a British narrator narrating this story of the parents were down at the bottom of the cliff, and the baby chick had to leap out of the nest and fall down the cliff to reach his parents. And the narrator is saying some don't survive because the chick took off. They don't fly yet. And he's bouncing against the cliff and he's tumbling down and down. And the guy's going, "Oh, he's not going to make it. He's not looking good for the chap." And he gets down, he gets to the bottom and he hits this big pile of stones and he tumbles all the way down to his parents' feet. And the guy's going, "Oh, I don't think he's alive." But the chick pops up and he goes, "Oh, he survived." And my son says, "This is how I feel with you leaving me."
Wow. Okay, so one of your son did not take it very well. What about your parents? What about the rest of the community? How did they react when you said, you know what, we are selling everything, we bought a boat, and we are going to sail across the world, leaving all our belonging? You don't have a place. I mean, I'm sure you have friends and family, but you don't have a place of your own anymore in the US, do you?
No, our boat is our home, our only home. A few of my friends threatened to sink our boat. They said, "We're gonna go down to the marina and we're gonna put a hole in it and sink it so you can't go." But our parents were both sailors and they're both the reason why we began sailing. Both of them had sailboats, but everything kind of fell into alignment so perfectly for us that we never really had any doubts that this is what we were meant to do.
You were a horsewoman, right?
Yes.
You had a business 100. You were in competition. I think one of your child was pretty highly ranked in international competitions. Were you also a sailor?
I began sailing competitively in college, and that's the reason why Dan and I met. My mom and dad had retired and moved from Charlotte to New Bern, North Carolina on the Pamlico Sound, which is a very active racing community. And I would go from college at UNCC 4 hours to New Bern and sail with my mom in her regattas. And there was an especially big regatta that I went there for. And my cousin, who was at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard 11 hours away, had a desk mate who was a merchant marine, graduated from Kings Point, a marine engineer, and a 3-time national dinghy champion. And he said to him, "Hey, friend, you want to come down to North Carolina and be a ringer on my Aunt Jerry's sailboat?" And he said, "Well, obviously." So they got in the van and they all came down, and we met that weekend. And it was a long weekend. So the evening before he was going back to Philly and I was going back to Charlotte, he said, "I have this dream to sail around the world someday." And I'm like, "Mine too. We have to get married." So the fourth day we were together after that, he proposed and I said yes. And the rest is history.
Wow. Incredible. Incredible. So now that we set the scene, we know what's going to happen, right? You are in this trip around the world, but again, what happened during the maiden voyage? Something that, you started to cross the Atlantic, and that crossing left you with PTSD.
Yes,
Tell
it
me,
did.
me the story.
I was not comfortable with storms and oceans. That was my fear through this process of what we were about to do. So we had taken a 1,000-mile training passage with a man that we had heard speak at a boat show. Because boat shows, you go and you listen to seminars by experienced sailors who talk about engine repairs and provisioning and life saving equipment. And his specialty was sailing in storms. And when he said at the end of his seminar, I have a training passage where I take you out in heavy weather. We sail 1,000 miles in the trade winds and big seas, and you get to experience this heavy weather. And I said, I have to do that, Dan, because he had been on merchant ships. He had crossed oceans. I had not. I'd been on a cruise ship, but that doesn't count. So we went on this heavy weather training passage, and we were in huge seas and strong winds, and he purposely sailed into gales and squalls. And when we got done, he goes, "You guys are gonna be great. You're gonna be fine." So with confidence, we bought our boat, but I still had some trepidation. So our first ocean crossing to cross the Atlantic to the Caribbean, I asked Dan, "Can we go into a boat? Can we do it through a boat rally?" And a rally is where the boats come together a week in advance and they look at your boat and your equipment and they give you speeches on how to do this safely. And they have a weather router that tells you, okay, this is your weather window, and he stays with you through your passage, which is like a 2-week passage. So that gave me a level of comfort. However, when we all headed off the 1st of November, we had to go down the coast of the United States to get to North Carolina where the Gulf Stream narrows. That's the safest place to cross it. And we heard a noise in our engine. And Dan's like, I really don't feel comfortable about crossing the Atlantic if there's something wrong with our engine. So we diverted. We went to Wilmington and everybody else crossed except us. So 10 days later, we couldn't find anything wrong. We pulled the boat out of the water even and had experts look at it. Nobody could find a reason for this cavitation we were having in our prop. So we tied back up to the dock, and the weather router contacted us at like 9 o'clock in the morning and said, "You have about an hour to get out and cross the Gulf Stream. Otherwise, you're going to be waiting like another 10 days for weather windows because there are storms coming. But if you can get across the Gulf Stream, like if you leave right now, you're going to be fine." So we listened to him and we untied our dock lines and we took off across the Gulf Stream. And it was an overnight crossing. And come the next morning, we had taken shifts all night, 3 hours on, 3 hours off. And I came up at 5 a.m. and Dan informed me, "Yeah, we're across the Gulf Stream. We should be good now." So he went down to bed, and so I'm sitting there, and as the sun comes up over the horizon, I see this giant wave coming towards us. And I was like terrified, and I just held on, and the boat went up and it went over the wave and went back down. I'm going, well, that didn't feel so bad. And then another one's coming. Sure enough, we go up and we go over it. And I said, well, wait a minute. That's what I've been feeling for the last half hour or so. This must be the size of the waves. But I just got terrified of their size. So I'm pounding my foot on the floor because his berth is right underneath the cockpit. And I'm yelling at him, "You got to get up here. You got to get up here." So he comes up. I'm going, "Look at the size of these waves." And they actually started getting bigger even as we were talking, and the wind is picking up. And I told him, "I'm not comfortable with this. You have to take over. I can't do this." So I went down, hid in my bed. And what had happened is, I don't know if you've seen the movie A Perfect Storm, where two fronts converge and it makes the waves bigger and bigger, and it's just not a good situation. Well, that's what we were in. We had a front behind us and a front in front of us, and they were driving everything together. So, in the matter of a couple of hours, the waves are now 17, 18 foot tall, and they're breaking on our boat like every 3 or 4 waves. We're not going over them. They're actually crashing onto the bow of our boat. And we had our dinghy secured to the bow of the boat to some teak handrails that were screwed into the deck. Well, the waves loosened the screws, and finally they ripped out of the deck. The handrails ripped out of the deck, and the dinghy was tossed through the lifelines of the boat. And unfortunately, the dinghy was tied to the mast. So as it's banging against the side of the boat, threatening to put a hole in it, it's also threatening to take off our mast. So Dan calls me up and he says, "You've got to take over. I have to go out on deck and I've got to cut the dinghy free." So he clipped into the lifelines and the harness and he goes out there and had to struggle, and he cut it free. And when I saw how quickly, in the blink of an eye, that dinghy just disappeared into the sea, I thought, if he goes in, I'm just going with him because I'll never be able to rescue him. I don't want to be on this boat in the storm. So if anything happens to him, I was ready to just jump in the sea and die with him. And not only that, but our anchor had become loosened with all of the pounding and the waves, and he had to go all the way up to the bow of the boat and tighten the chain so that it was no longer threatening to put a hole in the boat. But because the waves were so big, when we went up over a wave and it came down over the wave, he would actually be airborne because the boat would just disappear from under him. So he's up there very tenuously having to tighten this anchor, and he finally did get it done, and then he came back to the cockpit And it was then we decided that we needed to call somebody and find out what was going on. So we had satellite phones back then, and they were not reliable, and we didn't have a good connection, and we kept losing them and getting them back. And all we could hear was, "You have to get off the Atlantic now." And Dana's like, "But we might not make the Caribbean, but Bermuda or Bahamas are only 2 days away. We could get there in 2 days." He goes, "No, you have to get off the Atlantic now." So we hung up with him. Dan said, "Okay, we're gonna turn back," and we turned towards the west, and about 10 minutes later, the wind started calming down, the waves got down to 10 feet, the sun came out, and a pod of dolphins surrounded our boat and started leaping and jumping and flipping, and it was like you could hear the angels just going, "Hi." It was just like, "Oh my gosh, this was the right decision." We made it back to the coast of North Carolina, ended up 10 miles from where we started. We did 500 miles and had $14,000 worth of damage to our boat. So the insurance company covered 100% of the damage, but what it did to me inside was a totally different story.
Did you, how do you cope with that? You live on a boat, you had some rough weather, I'm sure, since then.
When we did finally cross the Atlantic again and made it to the Virgin Islands, I was ready to tell Dan I can't do this anymore because every time the wind started picking up beyond what it was supposed to or the waves got bigger, I would just have these panic attacks, this anxiety. And I said to myself, "This isn't fun. This isn't, I don't think I can do this for 10 years, go around the world and be terrified all the time." So we pulled into St. Martin, which is where we were staging to make our next Atlantic crossing. And I kept telling myself, today's the day I'm going to tell him he's got to like hire a crew to cross oceans. I'll fly and meet him there, but I can't do this anymore. And we put our anchor down, and there's probably 100 boats in this harbor. It was huge. And 3 boats away was the man we did our heavy weather training passage with. So the odds of that happening are probably a billion to one because first, our Earth is covered 80% of water. Second, there are hundreds of islands and hundreds of harbors. So for him to be 3 boats away was definitely something in our favor. So we called him on the marine radio and said, "Hey, John, it's Dan and Allison. We bought the boat you recommended. We've been out here sailing." He's like, "Oh, I can't wait to see you guys. Come on over." So we went over there for happy hour and we're talking. And then he looks at me and goes, "So, Allison, how's it going?" And I just started tearing up. And I'm like, "John, it's terrible. We were caught in this storm." And I relayed the whole story to him and he starts laughing. I'm like, "Why are you laughing?" And he goes, "You know how lucky you are?" I'm like, "No." He said, "Your boat did fine, your husband did fine, and you are still out here." He said, "Do you know how many people would have gone back and the very first thing they would have done is sold the boat and never gone sailing again? And the chances of you ever being in that scenario again are probably 0 because it's not going to happen again. You made it through and you're just fine and you're going to be fine." And he was the only person in the world that could have looked at me and told me that, and I would have believed him. So we continued. And yes, I still have fear. And yes, things have gone wrong, but I've never felt in danger or like our life is being threatened or that we couldn't get through it. So I've learned to accept that I am a fearful person and that I do have anxiety, but I'm trusting in this process that we are meant to get around this globe.
So, as we know, you lived with your husband on a 100
No,
hectare,
10-acre farm. Yeah, 10
oh,
acre
10
farm.
hectare. Okay, quite big. And now you're stuck on a boat with him. How does that pressure your marriage?
Well, considering he is my soulmate, I have no problem living on 43 feet with him. In fact, I get anxious if he leaves my sight. When we go to land, I don't even like him to go to a different grocery store than I do. He's my lifeline. He is the most patient human being on the planet because I'm quite sure any other man would have thrown me overboard by now with all my anxiety and my neediness. But he is so capable. He has saved us. He's literally like MacGyver of the boat world. He saved us from sinking with a paperclip. He just, whatever happens, he stays calm, cool, collected, and just does what needs to be done to fix the problem. And maybe it's not right away, but eventually he fixes it. And I have just learned to trust him implicitly. And we just align so well as far as our personalities. And
Do you think you see your marriage, your wedding, I mean, you're living together with Dan, differently now that you've been through this experience and living on the boat from when you were living on the farm?
Yes, because we led very independent lives, kind of. He was into Boy Scouts and camping and ice hockey, and I had my equestrian program. And while, yes, he was my truck driver and he attended all the competitions that I went to, we were still always drawn apart by our various activities that were separate in our jobs and things. And now our relationship is much different. I rely on him so much more because I'm out of my comfort zone and I'm in his comfort zone. His comfort zone is the sea.
How many countries have you been through since you started your sailing adventure? I heard anywhere from 40 to 50, even
We have
54, I
been
think.
we've been to 50 in
Okay.
4 continents.
So, 4 continents. Okay. Do you know that about half the people listening to this don't have a passport in the
Really?
US? Only 1 in 9 Americans have never left the states where they were born. So you're in the Marquesas, pretty far from mainland USA. What do you see from there that people can see from home?
So, I see a totally different culture where people don't rely on materialistic things, and I think in the US, our lives are very driven about owning things and having things, and they live for instead of living life for enjoyment, they live life for materialistic things. And the people here are very different because they have nothing. They have these little tiny huts. Most of them don't even have beds. They just sleep on mattresses on the floor. And their enjoyment is sitting with their friends and singing and playing music at night and pig roasts and festivals and honoring their cultures and getting in their canoes and going out and paddling every night. And it brings them together as a people, and I think they just appreciate life more because they're not distracted with all the things that they have to own and buy, and the more you buy, the more you have to work to keep them, and you stop living your life for you, you live it for everything that you have, and that's been a huge eye opener for us.
And I read that you also were maybe surprised. I don't know if surprised is the right word, but by the generosity of people you didn't know, people you don't even speak the language of. Could you have a concrete example of how that is happening to you?
Well, we have been now in 5 countries or more 5 countries for 3 months or more because of broken boat part, and I'm talking Spain, Portugal, Cape Verde, here in the Marquesas, and I can't remember where else, but when you're living somewhere and you see the same people every day and they understand your circumstance, people just become so generous. So I can just tell you that the people have responded by knowing that we're in this situation, and they have come through and they have given us fresh vegetables. They've transported us to places that we needed to go. In Ireland, when we were stuck there during COVID for 2 years, and we walked down the dock, and I just saw a man who had a hat on that I recognized the symbol, and I started talking to him. And this man that we've never met or never had any reason to help us, he drove us 2 hours in his car to go get something that we needed. And there's just all these examples of total strangers that have come to help us and given us things that we've needed and never asked for anything in return. And I can't think of many incidences where that happened to us during our land life.
Do you think this is something that American have?
I don't think that we're in the same situation in America in general. People have their routines, they have their daily lives, they go to work, they come home, they do their activities in their home. It's very rare that if they need something, they can't go out and get it themselves. When you're in a situation where you're on a boat and you have only what is on your 43 feet of boat, you find yourself needing things more often. And when something goes wrong, you don't have the resources to repair it or find a solution to it. And this is where people step up all the time. And it may not necessarily even be the people that live there, it might be other sailors. And sailors have like this black box. And when you go and you do something good for somebody, you get something in that box. And when you need something, then something comes to you. And we see that over and over again. Like we just unexpectedly, people will come to us and help us out when we really, really needed it. But they always say, we're like, well, thank you. What can we do for you? They're like, no, it's going to be fine because when we need help, somebody's going to help us. And that's the way this community works.
So when you wrote to me, you said something like freedom versus security. What living the American dream has taught me. So America sells itself as the land of freedom. What do you learn, or what did you learn about freedom from countries that don't describe themselves that way?
So in America, freedom is owning your own home and having a car and having a piece of property and your children having activities in school and all that kind of thing. But I find that the more that you embrace all that, the more you become tied to it. So for us, our version of freedom is living with being powered by the wind and the sun. Our electricity comes from the sun. We move from the wind and being able to see the whole world without any restrictions or anybody telling us that we have to be somewhere or do something. And it's a totally different perspective than we had when we left. When we landed in Cape Verde, are you familiar with Cape Verde? It's an island off the coast of Africa on the west coast of Africa, and it's its own little country. And it's equal distance from South America, North America, and Africa. So it was used for the slave trade. They brought all the slaves to this island, and they didn't have to make any fences or barriers because there was nowhere for them to go. And it's a small group of islands. And we were stuck there for 3 months. And I learned what true poverty is and truly being trapped is because these people, they don't have a future there. The economy is terrible. The poverty level is really high. They live on like $160 a month is the average income. They have 6 last names on the island because nobody new comes in and marries there. So the women have babies, and instead of getting married, they just pass them off to their aunts or their grandmothers or whatever. And 70% of the children born there leave. They somehow get off the island and escape. And I guess that was the first real eye opener that depending where you live, your situation could totally entrap you in a place like this. And it was very depressing to be there. And the number one trade, well, they will not admit this publicly, is drug traffic. So there's a lot of drugs being passed back and forth, and a lot of very not good people that come into these harbors and things. So that definitely gave me an education on what life could be like depending on where you're born.
And you
Mhm.
watch the country from the outside through Trump's first term, the pandemic, George Floyd, and the protest, January 6th, the 2024 election. Most Americans watched it from American media, but you watched it from foreign media. What, how did you see? What did you see that we didn't see?
I just saw how the country was divided, and I've never seen division like that, not in the time that we lived there. And it was difficult to watch because you saw how adamant people were on each side and how they refused to meet in the middle and try to find a solution. All there was like hatred and vengeance and things happening that just made us shudder. And we're like, why does it have to be like this? We don't, it just tore the country apart. And I feel like it's still torn apart, obviously. And we were kind of glad that we weren't there, to be honest.
Okay. And when you meet someone and they realize that you're American, how do they react to that?
It There is no country when you're a sailor. You're just a sailor. So we, for instance, got together last on Saturday night. There was this get together for sailors, a big pig roast, and was sponsored by the local rum people that make rum here. And we talked to probably 6 or 7 sailing couples we had never met. And the concept of, well, where are you from never even came up. I don't even know what countries. They all had accents. Nobody had an American accent, but you have so much in common when you join this community. When you sell everything you own and you move on a boat, you give up your country. You are now just a sailor, a liveaboard blue water sailor. And that unites us all. And there's nothing that anybody out here would not do for somebody else in a heartbeat. It has no country has no meaning when you're on the sea. You're just all world travelers and you're all one pack of people.
You've written a novel called The Seven, where horses
Mhm.
sit in a judgment of humanity and decide whether we, human, deserve what we've been given. So you spent 30 years with horses, and then you started asking whether is it really, sorry, what I mean is it you asking if the human race is worth anything?
Me personally, I guess maybe on a subconscious level. When I sat down and wrote the book, it was because I had a dream where horses were judging me. And when I woke up, I thought that was such an interesting concept because horses have been such such an incredible part of human history. I mean, they allowed men to travel and explore new countries. Those that fought war on horseback were dominant. Horses plowed field. They carried the equipment they needed. They opened up the world for mankind, and yet man is more comfortable sitting behind the wheel of a car than they are standing next to a horse. Most people just see them like a dog or a cat or any other creature, but they have had such an impact on all of humanity. And their earliest forms were back around with when cavemen were here on the planet. I went through and I looked at the historical references to horses and mankind, and so many of them say that they know the heart of people, that they are the wind beneath humanity's wings. They just are so complementary from great leaders and all the way back centuries ago. So I just thought it was really apropos that they were put on this planet to be our watchdogs. And at some point, to make the judgment, does humanity appreciate the gifts of the earth? Or have we gotten so far away, removed from them, that we don't even care anymore about these incredible creatures?
Talking about the environment, you travel on a boat on the sea. Had that made you maybe more aware of the impact of humans on the planet, on the environment?
Absolutely. As sailors, like as a community, we really care about our oceans because this is our home. So sometimes we go to islands or whatever in it, you can see all this trash all over, and we'll get together and we'll go around and we'll pick up trash. We'll try to pick up the plastic and make places look beautiful again. And definitely if we see anything in the ocean that shouldn't be there, we go out of our way to pick it up, whether it's a bottle or a can or something that shouldn't be out there. Not a can because they'll eventually disintegrate, but anything plastic or rubber. And I think one of the greatest atrocities that we've seen, which is impacting us, is the Chinese fishing fleets. Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, with the tuna? No?
Well, it's not just tuna. They cast these 60-mile long nets, and everything they entrap dies, whether it's a whale, a dolphin, a sea turtle. They do take the fish and harvest the fish, and they travel in fleets of these 200-foot boats. And there's we saw a fleet of, I guess, nine or 10 of them. So they have a boat with a processing plant where they process all the fish they catch and then one to freeze it and then carrying the crew and the nets. And they just go around putting these nets out and just killing a lot of precious creatures that don't deserve to die. They were caught in the Galapagos Islands, which are very, very protected waters. And they had taken 90 shark, they had 90 shark fins on their boat, which means they pulled the sharks out, cut off the fins, and just threw their carcasses back into the water. And they were found and disabled, but we encountered them crossing the Pacific, and we were sailing through them, and they as being under sail, we had the right of way, and their boats were aimed right for us, and they refused to move, even calling them and hailing them on the radio, and we had to turn our engine on and evade them. Otherwise, they would have just hit us and wouldn't have even cared. And then to make matters worse, we were sailing, and in the middle of the night, about 700 miles from shore, our boat just snagged on something and just jolted, and we're like, "Well, we didn't run aground, we're in thousands of feet of water." But what happens is they cut part of their fishing net away if it gets tangled, and they leave them in the ocean, and sailboats with their rudders hit them, and we hit one, and it took out our steering and our autopilot. So we had to heave to and fix our steering and pick cables and tighten them. And it was really treacherous and 10-foot waves. And then we had to hand steer 680 miles across the Pacific Ocean because of the damage they did to our boat.
Wow. Have you?
Mhm.
So you left when you were 54? I believe you are now 62. What would you say to an American listening to this in their 50s who is living the life you used to live, wondering if it's too late for them to start an adventure like yours?
It's absolutely not too late. We see people out here in their 80s, believe it or not. Jumping on a boat and sailing around the world is not for everybody. The reason I was able to do it is because I married somebody that was a merchant marine and a marine mechanic. So you do have to come with a certain skill set to undertake something like this. But I highly recommend seeing the world because your perspective changes so much on your life and your situation when you get out and see how the rest of the world lives.
How did that would affect the average American, you think?
I think it would open their eyes that too many Americans are just so comfortable in what they have that they're not really living a broad life or learning about everything else there is in this world. You're comfortable going home to your beautiful house with your manicured lawn and your routine and your schedule. But then what happens? You get old and you go into a rest home or you die and you've never experienced even a fraction of the beauty and the adventure and everything else that's on this planet. It's incredible what's out here and just life under the ocean. I mean, our world is covered by 80% of water, and there's such an amazing environment under that ocean that they never, on a daily basis, don't even think about. But yet it's bigger than all of us put together, and it's a huge part of our world. And learn to snorkel or scuba dive and go have some adventures because there is nothing like swimming up to a manta ray under the ocean and running your hand across its beautiful white belly as it glides above you like this giant bird. It's just awe-inspiring and incredible.
Thank you, Alison. My last question is, what is America to you, especially now that you started sailing across the world?
It'll always be home because it's where my children live and our parents live, and that's who I am. I mean, I'm an American, and I'm very thankful for the way that the privilege that we had growing up and everything that we had because it allowed us to be here and doing this. And I don't think I would ever live anywhere else permanently, like, even when we're done someday, I think I'd always go back to America because I appreciate everything that is there and what an incredible history that our country has. We're huge history buffs. So every night we listen to a podcast that takes us through the entire history of the United States. And there are so many incredible people that sacrifice so much for us to have what we have. And I feel like we really need to appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you would like to share before we hang up?
So on my author website, which is AlisonGieschen.com, I have like stories behind the stories, like why I picked each character of the seven and a history of the breeds of horses and things. If people are interested, that's a fun thing to go and look at some of my author posts. And sailmates.org is our travel blog. So every time we land in a new country, I take photos and tell you the history of the place and show you our pictures and our adventures. But that's about it.
Are you currently working on a new book?
I am. I have Riding the Waves of Reality 1 and 2, which cover the first parts of. 1 is about selling our boat, our house, moving on board, and 2 is our time in the Mediterranean, and 3 is crossing the Pacific and here in the Marquesas Islands. And I'm getting ready to finish that one up soon.
Alison, thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you for having me.
If this episode was interesting to you, share it with a friend or a family member who might want to hear it too. And if you have a minute, please leave us a rating at rate.backinamericathepodcast.com. Ratings are how podcasts get discovered. They push the show higher in search results and recommendation, which bring in new listeners. It is the single most useful thing you can do to support Back in America.